Good day, everyone. I am Golden Burse, and today we are going to talk about dyslexia. I'm going to talk about its history, definition and classification, and prevalence rates of dyslexia. And then, after me, Ma'am Hermie will continue the flow of this discussion, and she will tackle about the teaching strategies and educational program for dyslexia. And after Ma'am Hermie, Sir Jimwell will going to share one research study and its findings at the end. And at the end, we will relate our topic from a Bible verse or an Ellen G. White writing. So, let's begin. The history of dyslexia. Word blindness was the first name of dyslexia, and it was developed by the German physician Adolf Kasmol in 1877 and identified by Oswald Berkhan, a German physician in mental illness, in 1881. While in 1887, Rudolf Berlin coined dyslexia to bring the diagnosis in the line with contemporary international medical literature, which elsewhere described the similar conditions of alexia and paralexia. The word dyslexia is a combination of a Greek prefix, which means hard, bad, or difficult, and lexis, means speech or word. He used the term to refer to a case of a young boy who had a severe impairment in learning to read and write, despite showing typical intellectual and physical abilities in all other aspects. And a British physician named Pringle Morgan from Seaford East Sussex published a description of a reading-specific learning disorder to report in the British Medical Journal titled "Congenital Word Blindness" in 1896. And in 1917, James Henshelwood, a British ophthalmologist, Henshelwood asserted that the primary disability was in visual memory for words and letters, and described symptoms including letter reversals and difficulties with spelling and reading comprehension. C.J. Thomas, a British physician, Thomas recommended that children with this disability be taught on a one-to-one basis and initially teach the alphabet be accomplished through touch by encouraging the child to handle large wooden letters. And Samuel T. Orton, a neuropsychiatrist who worked primarily with stroke victims. Orton began studying reading difficulties and determined that there was a syndrome unrelated to brain damage that made learning to read difficult. Orton observed that the reading deficits in dyslexia did not seem to stem from strictly visual deficit. He believed the condition was caused by the failure to establish hemispheric dominance in the brain. In contrast, Dearborn, Gates, Bennett, and Blue considered a faulty guidance of the same mechanism to be the cause. They also demonstrated total or partial inversion, even sometimes affecting the order of the word in a sentence. They revealed a curious impression of not just horizontal, but also vertical inversions. There are errors that exist amongst people with dyslexia, and they suffer from the aggravating circumstances inherent in all learning. Although Orton's theory of cerebral dominance proved incorrect, it was key to shifting discussion of dyslexia's etiology toward theories of cognitive development. For Tim Miles, one of the preeminent researchers in dyslexia's history of all the early pioneers, was the one who, more than anyone else, put what we now call developmental dyslexia on the map. Orton was also the first researchers to advocate phonics instructions, for those who with dyslexia. The general approach still recommended today. In 1949 of June, the Orton Society was formalized by Samuel Widow and continues today as the International Dyslexia Association. Dyslexia is a learning disorder that involves difficulty in reading due to problems identifying speech sounds and learning how they relate to letters and words. Also, called reading disability, dyslexia affects areas of the brain that process languages. People with dyslexia have a normal intelligence and usually have normal vision. Most children with dyslexia can succeed in school with tutoring and special education programs. Emotional support also plays an important role. Though there's no cure for dyslexia, early assessment and intervention can result in the best outcome. Sometimes dyslexia go undiagnosed for years and isn't recognized until adulthood, but it is never too late to seek help. Primary dyslexia is passed in family lines through genes or through new genetic mutations, and it is found more often in boys than in girls. Secondary or developmental dyslexia. This type of dyslexia is caused by problems with brain development during the early stage of fetal development. Types of dyslexia. Phonological deficit. Phonological deficit is difficulty decoding or assembling words based on their sounds. Note that phon- phon- phonemic awareness is not a reading deficit since it involves only sounds and not letters. Speed or naming deficits. Speed or naming deficits slows reading, poor use of sight words, and sight word. A sight word is a word that is instantly recognized by the reader. It is not sounded out and requires almost no effort to understand. Next is comprehension deficit. Comprehension deficit is poor understanding of what was just read. Signs of dyslexia can be difficult to recognize before your child enters school, but some early clues may indicate a problem. Once your child reaches school age, your child teacher must be the first to notice a problem. Severity Severity varies, but the condition often becomes apparent as the child starts learning to read. Symptoms. Signs that a young child may be at a risk of dyslexia include late talking, learning new words slowly, problems forming words correctly, such as reversing sounds in words or confusing words that sounds alike, problems remembering or naming letters, numbers, and colors, difficulty learning nursery rhymes or playing rhyme games. Once your child is in school, dyslexia sign symptoms may become more apparent, including reading well below that the expected level for age, problems processing and understanding what he or she hears, difficulty finding the right word or forming answers to questions, problems remembering the sequence of things, difficulty seeing and occasionally hearing, and some similarities differences in letter and words, inability to sound out the pronunciation of an unfamiliar word, difficulty in spelling, spending an unusual long time completing tasks that involves reading or writing, avoiding activities that involves reading. Dyslexia signs in teens and adults are similar to those in children. Some common dyslexia signs and symptoms in teens and adults include difficulty in reading, including reading aloud, slow and labor-intensive reading and writing, mispronouncing names or words, or problems retrieving words, trouble understanding jokes or expressions that have a meaning not easily understood from the specific words, or such as idioms, such as piece of cake, meaning and its meaning is easy. Difficulty summarizing a story, trouble learning a foreign language, difficulty memorizing, and difficulty doing math problems. Dyslexia can be acquired or developmental. Acquired, acquired in stroke or trauma, and if it's acquired, it can be deep difficulty in semantics or hard to understand the meaning or jokes. The mind is always loading, or surface difficulty with sight words. In developmental, it is the most common case when it comes to dyslexia. Phonological, phonological. The word and the letters are dancing. P become B and A become E and many more. So acquired is more dysiadic and more visual, and developmental is more dysphonetic and more auditory. Prevalence rates of dyslexia. Worldwide statistics emphasize that 1 in 10 people will have dyslexia. Upon reading and hearing this, many individuals can be surprised on how widespread and abundant this neurodiversity can be. In a class of 30 students, an office of 30 workers, or a shop with 30 customers, statistically, at least 3 of those individuals in each settings will have some of this called dyslexia. According to NHS, 1 in 10 people in the UK have some degree of dyslexia. Estimates of the prevalence dyslexia vary from about 15 to 20% depending in part on how dyslexia is defined. A staggering 5 to 15% of Americans, or 14.5 to 43 million children and adults, have dyslexia. Expanding on this much larger scale, in a world of approximately 7.8 billion people, roughly at least 780 million could have dyslexia. According to Yale Center of Dyslexia and Creativity, as many as 15 to 20% of the population as a whole have some of the symptoms of dyslexia.